Welcome to the narrated step-by-step tutorial for my painting, Waiting for Spring. The photograph on the right was a reference and inspiration for this painting. It was taken recently at the end of winter, just as the temperature's starting to warm up, and there's no leaves on the tree yet, but the grass and some of the ground cover is just starting to green up a little bit, and that's why I call it Waiting for Spring. This is the sketch that I did for my painting. It's done on a quarter sheet of 140-pound cold press watercolor paper using a bead pencil. I've made this sketch as well as the reference photo and image of the painting available on my online learning center. You can find it on the top menu of my landing page where it says YouTube reference materials. The link to the landing page you'll find at the top right of this screen. This is the list of the various paints that I used in this painting. I want to point out about the cerulean blue. A lot of times I'll use cerulean blue and raw sienna together. The formula that I use, the brand that I use, uses the pigment PB36. I've noticed that people who have a cerulean blue that uses a pigment PB35 get a much greener mixture than what I do using the PB36. So if you're trying to get the same kind of results that I am using raw sienna and cerulean blue, it's best if you have PB36 as the base pigment. I'm going to begin with a wash of cerulean blue, and I'm using a 1/2-inch flat brush. I'm working at a 15 to 20 degree angle, and I'm working wet on dry. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a quarter sheet of 140-pound cold press Watercolor watercolor paper. And as I apply this, I want to maintain a bead of water on the leading edge so that I don't get a hard edge. And I've started to work in some raw sienna and some rose madder quinacridone. And I'm adding those just to pick up just some subtle color changes in the sky. As I bring this wash down, I'm going to continue to maintain a bead of water on the leading edge so that I can get an even wash without having the paint set any hard edges. If I didn't maintain that saturation point in the leading edge, it would start to dry rather quickly and could leave me unwanted hard edges in the area of the sky. So I bring this wash down around the edges of the building, and even though I'm working at an angle, I don't have to worry about the bead of water breaking loose because it's not that steep of an angle, and I have enough water to maintain a bead on the leading edge, but it's not doesn't have so much water that it's going to start to drip. And I'm working wet on dry. Now I'm going to continue to bring this wash down, but I've reloaded my brush with an earth tone that's a mixture of burnt sienna with a little royal blue in it, and I just continue it as part of the wash that I was laying down. And this is the area that represents the distant tree lines and behind this barn structure. I'm going to move over to the other side, and I'm going to continue that wash down, and I've reloaded my brush with a mixture that has raw umber and royal blue in it. And also I'll introduce some raw sienna as part of this. Now this wash that I'm putting in now has some raw sienna and also some sap green. There's some pines that are blending in here behind this tree that's more in the foreground. And this is a mixture of mostly burnt sienna. So you can see that I've painted this as one continuous wash. I started with a sky wash, and then I let it change into some earth tones, into some green tones, just by reloading my brush as I continued to wash. So I still had the leading edge of the bead of water coming down with the cerulean blue, and I just let that go right into the green tones and the burnt sienna tones that I have. And now I'm taking a little richer mixture with some burnt sienna, and I've added a little bit of quinacridone and rose in it, just a touch, and some royal blue, just giving a darker reddish brown tone in these bushes. So one of the things that I've done just by continuing this wash, by just changing the mixture that I was taking from my palette, is I've been able to maintain soft edges coming down as I transition from the sky to the distant tree lines to these kind of bush shapes that are here more in the foreground on the left. The underside of the bushes there is going to be darker and cooler. So I'm taking a mixture of raw umber and royal blue and touch it into the wash that's already there. So right now the application is wet and wet as I'm going back in to the area where I'd put a wash down and introducing more paint with a loaded brush. It's fully saturated. At this point, I've completely dried my paper. So I brought the one large continuous wash down all the way to the bushes in the front and the tree line on the right. And now I'm coming back in with a mixture of raw umber, again with a little bit of burnt sienna and some royal blue in it. And there's a tree that's behind this building. And so I'm putting some color down there to give the indication of the tree shape. Keep in mind, this is at the end of winter. There's no leaves growing on these trees yet. It's just a bunch of branches, which often in the distance just kind of leave a little bit of a smoky, hazy shape there with some soft edges. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm coming back in on top of the wash that I put down and just giving an indication of this tree shape back there, but using very soft edges. Now I've dried that wash there, and I'm going to do the same thing on this tree that's more in the foreground to the left. Just putting down a little bit of paint here. It's very wet, and I'm going to put some more touches on this other tree shape because it dried quite light. And I'm going to take some water and soften those edges a little bit, just as I have with the spray bottle, but it's a little more precise when using the brush. So just softening the edges, and I like to use a tissue to blot it sometimes, again, to soften edges or create a little texture. I'm going to insert the image of the reference photo in the top right corner so you can see the development of this painting as compared to the reference photo. So here in the front of this building, there's some large, tall, dried grass and little bushes. So I'm using a mixture of burnt sienna with some raw sienna in it, and some of those darker tones towards the bottom are a mixture of raw umber and royal blue. And taking my brush now, I've dried it a little and it's damp, but I'm lifting out some of the paint because it gets a little lighter in the front of this area of grass and bushes. So I use the damp brush to lift some of that out. I'm going a little darker here. So these are all mixtures with burnt sienna, raw umber, royal blue, raw sienna. There's a little bit of yellow ochre in a few spots, but some of these earth tones that I listed earlier in the video, I'm just using these in different combinations. Carry that over just a little bit. Next, I'm going to take my plastic scraper here, and I'm going to scrape some of the grass shapes into this area that I've painted. So it was quite wet when I applied the paint, and it started to dry a little bit more towards a damp state. That's the best time to try and scrape. And when you do this, you're pushing the paint. You're not really scraping the paper. You're just moving the paint. And the best time to do that is when it's damp and it has just like a slight sheen to the paper. So this is a little plastic scraping tool that you can get at Cheap Joe's. And you can use credit cards or a variety of broken up plastic pieces. But I like this one. It has nice flexibility and it gives a good result. I'm going to reinsert the reference photo in the top right corner as I start to paint the ground cover here. If you look at the reference photo, you can see the large shapes that make up that ground cover. And I'm not worried about trying to paint individual blades of grass so much. I will put some textures and some linear marks in various places, but I'm painting this as one large shape, and the ground is flat and it's at a bit of an angle. So I'm going to use that to my advantage, my brush strokes, to give the indication of the direction and try and contour the land a little bit. Just give the indication that it's flat and that it winds up a little bit of a hill to the barn door. So this is just going to be one large wash. It's going to paint this whole shape that's in the foreground here. To paint this, I'm using a 1-inch flat brush, and I'm working wet on dry, but my paint is very saturated. It's not a damp brush or a dry brush. It doesn't scrape and leave a texture when you put it on the paper. It is fairly loaded and gives nice coverage as the brush moves over the surface. And I've used a combination here of yellow ochre, raw sienna, burnt sienna, sap green, and a little bit of raw umber. And you can kind of see where the green tones and the reddish brown tones are and the gold tones, and a little bit of a cooler brown here. I'm using the raw umber. So I'm trying to be very intentional with my brush strokes and show some direction and contour the kind of flatness of the land, although it does have some irregularity to it. So my paint was saturated, my paper was saturated, and it started to dry a little bit, and my brush right now is damp, and so it lifts a little bit, but I'm using the damp brush to make some marks to strengthen the emphasis of the direction here and help contour the land a little bit more, make a stronger statement. I do have to be careful that I don't go in with too wet of a brush and start causing a lot of backwashes. But it's also a perfect time right now where it's damp and a sheen to push some of this paint. Just give just a slight indication of some of these grassy shapes, some linear marks, but that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to try and render the whole front lawn. Now I'm going to paint the roof here, and I'm using a 1/2-inch flat brush and working wet on dry. Everything else has been dried. The paper's been dried thoroughly. And I'm working with cerulean blue, burnt sienna, royal blue, a little bit of raw umber, some raw sienna, and at times I'll be using some rose madder quinacridone. And you can see as I apply this wash how I'm reloading with different colors at times here. There's some raw sienna, and it just goes right into the other colors that I've put down. And I've got some quinacridone rose madder, and I'm thinning it out a little bit with some water here in my brush, but I'm just giving that variety of color in the rooftop. And in the photo there's a variety of color actually on this barn and a variety of colored shingles, and I'm not going to end up painting every little shingle on the rooftop, but I'll give an indication of some of those shapes. And I'm trying to accomplish more here with just some of these color changes in the rooftop, because it has some of these blues and reds and gray tones in it. So as I said, I'm working wet on dry, 1/2 inch flat brush, loaded with water and paint, so it gives nice coverage. And I continue to work at an angle, but I don't have to worry about that running, because the dry paper is going to resist the flow of that paint. I'm going to put a wash on the other part of the building here, and just using the same colors that I did on the other area of the rooftop. There's a fairly well-defined shadow area here on the left side of this building, and so I'm going to go ahead and paint that using a mixture of royal blue and raw umber. So I'm still using a 1/2 inch flat brush. So it's this whole side area on the left side of this building, that where the right side is blocking the sun, or the light source that's coming in. So I'm painting this all as one shape, even though there's different surfaces here. There's the area just under the peak of the rooftop, there's an area right on the roof, and there's the shadow area that goes down parts of the sides. I've painted that all as one shape. Now I'm going to take some of that mixture with just a little bit more blue in it and some more water, so it's a little lighter, and I'm going to go underneath this rooftop here. On the front of the building, I'm going to paint the shadowed area. So that area just under the roof and the front side of the building there, it's a lighter tone than what I did at the left, but it's still, they kind of work together as one big shape, all those shadows coming together. I didn't paint the shadow on each of these surfaces independently. I painted them as just a large shadow shape. Now I've added a little bit more burnt sienna to the mixture to warm it up some, and I'm using my 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm just working my way around some of the areas of the building, just giving an indication of where some shadows may be, where some edges come together in the building, seams, and just starting to paint a little bit of the detail of the building and some of the value changes that are happening around it. Now I'm going to paint this dark shape that's created by this open door in the barn. I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush, working wet on dry. My brush is fully loaded. It's very saturated with a mixture from my palette. And it's a mixture of royal blue, raw umber, and I have a little bit of burnt sienna in there to warm it up a little bit, but it's hard to see because it's such a dark value. And I'm just going to bring that value all the way down and just paint this large dark shape. And there's just a little bit of light in a small shape that's coming through the background, so I'm going to leave that in there. And there's a smaller dark value right beside the larger shape, and it just has like a 2x4 beam that's holding up that area that separates the two. And you can see that little light shape that I left in the back. I probably could have shifted that to the left a little bit more so it's not so centered, but it's really not, doesn't have that much of an impact. Now I'm going to paint another large dark shape that's created by another open door, but a smaller area. Still use my flat brush, and the mixture is once again royal blue with some raw umber, and it has a little bit of burnt sienna, but this is a little cooler than the other dark shape that I painted there for that door opening, because it just had a warmer tone on the larger one to the left, and was getting some bounce light coming in there. And this one that's up top here as you enter the barn it seems to be deeper, darker in there, and it's a little cooler tone. But with this dark value, it's hard to see, and it's very hard to see on the video. There's a small building on the right, and the left side of the roof is just very dark shape. So I'm going to paint that using the same dark value mixture I just used on those large shapes. And I painted this with a number 4 round brush. It's a synthetic brush made by Princeton. It's part of their Aqua Elite. So it's their synthetic sable line, and it has a nice sharp point, so I can get very detailed with it. And that's what I'm using here, just to make some linear marks on the edge of the building and paint some deeper shadows right underneath the edge of this roof. But this particular brush, as I said, it's a Aqua Elite made by Princeton, a size 4 round, and it's their synthetic sable. So it's a pretty economical brush, and it holds a nice point. Here I'm doing some more detailed brush work on just some of these smaller elements, cleaning up some of these edges, and just using this dark value just to move around the picture a little bit, cleaning some edges and painting some of the smaller dark shapes. Yeah, I'm just continuing on with the dark value, just making some linear brush marks here to indicate some of the edges of the various elements of this building, where something overhangs, or where two boards come together. But just doing some linear work using line to define or describe some of these edges and some of these areas where different sections come together. I think often we get so caught up in painting objects that we forget about how powerful line can be, in its use of line to show direction or just define edges. And I think the use of line gets overlooked sometimes. Now I've dried everything, and so I'm working back to working wet on dry, and I've got my round wash brush I like to use, and I'm taking this mixture with some raw umber, a little burnt sienna, and I'm putting this on top of the area that I painted, because I have this tree here that's more in the foreground and it's in front of this building, but it's still just a bunch of branches without any real leaves on it. So I'm going to soften the edges up using this fine mist spray bottle that I like to use, and just give the suggestion of this kind of hazy grouping of branches that's here in front of this barn. And I think sometimes people, it's challenging for them to put a wash like this on top of something they just finished painting, but this is in the foreground, and it's just a soft edge shape that I'll come back to and put some branches on it. But this is just kind of how it looks in this early part of the season in between winter and spring. I'm going to take that same color and do a little bit of the same brush work on the other side here where this other tree is in the foreground. I've done some painting in that area with soft edges, but I just want to strengthen that a little bit with a little darker value. I've reinserted the photograph in the top right corner, in this area of the building has what amounts to some yellow toned brick that's at the base of this barn. So I'm painting that right now using some yellow ochre and a little bit of raw sienna. They're very close colors. You can use one or the other, but just giving the tone of that brick that's much different than the rest of that barn structure there, which has the white planks on it. This area just above this door has just a little bit of a warm tone to it, so I'm just putting a light glaze of some yellow ochre on top of that area. Now I'm going to take a mixture with some raw sienna, some cerulean blue, and try and give an indication here of some of these planks on the side of this barn. I don't want to try and paint every board. I'm just giving an indication, just giving a suggestion of these panels to create the feel of that. And the mixture I'm using isn't very dark. It's got a lot of water into it. It's not much more actually than just some dirty water is about what it looks like. And I'll vary this and lean a little bit more towards the blue side or a little bit more towards the raw sienna side to go a little warm or go a little cool. I'm going to continue the same activity on the front of the larger part of the building here. So I'm just taking my round brush, and this is a sable brush that I'm using. It doesn't have as fine a point as the sable synthetic that I was using, and it's actually a pretty good brush for what I'm trying to do right now, which is just give the indication of some of these planks. And I try to vary the length and the positioning of my brush marks, just create a little bit of variation so it doesn't look like a picket fence along the front of this. And as I said, I'm not trying to paint every little board. I'm just giving the suggestion of some of these so the viewer has an idea of what's going on there on the side. So I brought that brushwork all the way down this building here, and I've just started to soften the edges a little bit as it starts to get to where the tree shape is. And I'm gonna again, using that same mixture, give an indication of some of those boards on this smaller building. Now I'm going to begin to paint the trunks of the trees. I'm using a 1/2 inch flat brush, and I have at the moment I have a mixture of raw umber with a little bit of cerulean blue in it and a little royal blue, and now I'm coming in with some raw sienna. So a variety of mixtures that are based off of raw sienna and cerulean blue. And as I mentioned, when I was going through the colors, I use a cerulean blue that has a base pigment of PB36, and I have seen in workshops and people have messaged me that they have trouble getting the same kind of mixtures, that the colors that I get using those two colors, and it seems as though it's when the base pigment of the cerulean blue is a PB35. It gives a much greener result. So instead of some of the neutrals that I'm able to get with my mixture, it tends to be a greener mixture you get if you have a PB35 based cerulean blue. Here I've switched to a liner brush, and I've painted this smaller sapling there, and just painting some of these branches and trying to do them all at the same time, because really when you look at a tree, even though the branches and the trunk are independent elements, it kind of comes across as a big shape. And if you don't paint it most of it at the same time, you'll have some hard edges in areas that won't look right. So if you can try and paint it when you're working on some of these elements at the same time, then you just kind of blend together, and you don't have the hard edges in areas that you may not want them. So here in this distant tree, I'm giving an indication of some branches, just some linear marks, and this is on top of the area where I put a wash that was just a soft edge wash to give the indication of all the branches and twigs that are in this tree that doesn't have any leaves or anything yet. It's just giving a hint, just giving a suggestion of the activity of that tree back there. I'm using the same mixture and taking my liner brush and just giving the indication of some branches and some twigs and things sticking out of the ground there on top of the area that I've already painted. So I don't have to try and paint every little branch and stick that I see in my photograph. I'm just giving the suggestion of that kind of activity in that area, these brushes with just little branches and twigs sticking off of them. I'm going to continue some of that activity over towards the building here, the barn, and there's a little sapling that's growing up there, so I'm just going to give the indication of the sapling. It creates a nice overlap and helps build depth into the composition. So just a few branches, a trunk and a few branches is all I need to do to indicate that. And I'm going to also give a suggestion of some long grass and branches growing up there in some of those areas that I've already painted along the front of the barn. And just as I did on the other tree, I'm going to take my 1/2-inch flat brush with the same types of mixtures: cerulean blue, raw sienna, raw umber, royal blue. And you can see I'm painting this tree all at the same time, so it's kind of it's like a continuous wash that goes from the trunk to the branches, but it reads as one shape when you really look at it. But that's really how trees appear. And here I've got a larger liner brush that maybe is just a little heavy for most of it, but it just gives me some stronger branches. And now I have my number 1 liner brush, size 1, and I'm going to put some more branches on this tree. I'm going to overlap this barn. This tree is casting a shadow, just a bit of a shadow here on the ground. So I'm taking some of the same tone and just making a shadowed area there. I'm also just a few touches there in some other areas to suggest a little bit of shadow and the irregularity of the ground cover. I'm going to put a little bit more detail on the top of the building here. On the peak, there's just some dark tones that have formed, I think, from just the wear. And some areas have faded, some areas have some minerals that have come down from moisture over the years. So I'm going to paint these dark areas here, and I'm also going to put a few lightning rods on top of this building. So there's just a few of these that go across the top, and they're positioned pretty much where these dark value marks are at. And as I put these down, I don't want them to all look the same, even though those two are pretty close. I want to try and vary these other ones a little bit more if I can. They're still pretty close. This one's going to be a little shorter. I just won't take it up all the way. A little different there. There's a bit of a pattern to some shingles on the top of the roof. And as far as shape, there's like a little rounded shingle. So I'm just giving just a hint of some of that. I'm not going to cover the entire roof with it. I'm just give a few marks here and there, and I'm using some neutral colors and some that are leaning a little more towards the red side, the warm side. But I'm using cerulean blue, raw umber, and quinacridone rose madder to mix some of these colors. I'm going to make a few of these shapes on this other area of the roof. And if you look, you can see some of these are warmer and some of these are cooler than others. Some have more of a reddish tone, while some lean a little bit more towards the gray or blue-gray. Going back to the number 4 round synthetic sable brush that I was using, and I'm going to paint a little bit more detail. Here these windows are very dark, so I need to paint those shapes as dark so they read as more as windows. I'm going to put some of these dark values in amongst the bushes and the branches here, as well as trying to clean up a few edges. Here I'm giving some darker values here towards the top. It gives the indication of that base of the barn, and that's a bit of an elevated surface up there. But still using this number 4 round brush with a fine point, just to do some small valued shapes and make some small dark valued brush marks in a few areas of the composition. I'm going to put a little bit of a darker value on the side here and through some of these bushes, just to tone some areas down and create a little more contrast between the bush shape there and what's going on at the side and the lighter valued area on the building. I'm going to put a little of this darker value here in the bush and the shrubs here. And I'm going to soften that a little bit. And I'm going to take it onto the little bit of the grassy area there, just to help further describe the flatness of that area. I'm going to take some burnt sienna with just a little bit of quinacridone and rose madder in it to make it a little orangier. And I'm going to put some up here on the top of this area here. There's a little bit of variation in the color of some of the bushes and the shrubs and weeds that are there. So I'm just going to put some of that tone in there and softening it up a little bit, but carry it also down here a little. These trees have some dried leaves still hanging on, so I'm going to take this fairly dark value, dark middle value, and just give a suggestion of a few of these leaves just hanging around. It also kind of picks up the pattern of the little marks that are on the rooftop and just repeats them a little bit, so it helps tie some of this together, just having those little shapes. I'm going to put a mat on this, get a good look at it. And that's my painting, waiting for spring. I hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't already, be sure to check out my online learning center where you can link to my YouTube channel, reference material for my YouTube channel, information about my workshops, and you can see my latest online courses. And as always, if you have questions about my materials, you can go to the studio page on my website, rsurowiczart.com, and you can always email me with questions at contact@rsurowiczart@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.